Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mike Rosehart Show, live every Wednesday. And today we're going to be talking about unplugging yourself from all the stresses, all the stuff you don't want to deal with. That to me is what the financial independence, retire early movement, at the core of it, that's what it's about, is trying to find ways to disconnect from the mainstream rat race. And so I guess today we'll talk a little bit about that. And that's been what's been on my mind this week is, when is the right time to really pull the trigger on, selling your business or, retiring from that job you don't like, or whatever it is, that next chapter, right? As you move into financial independence, and hopefully you've built a stable base. And so a piece of it is financial, and it's a large piece. What is that amount that you need, and how much passive income do you need? What kind of assets are you going to be investing into? What sort of returns will those produce? That'll be indicative of how much you need. So that's a bit of what we're going to talk about. And on like this treadmill where we can't stop continually evolving and growing. And it is human nature to want to grow. Now, we all set goals. We all want to feel like we're improving. That's the biggest, I think that's what it means to be human, is to be continually learning and improving. That's what makes our species so great, is that we continue to learn and grow and develop. And I think that if you don't have growth, you're going to feel very unsatisfied in your life. And so the way our society is sort of pre-programmed is to feel like we're growing within our careers. We want to see, we get promoted over time. It's directly causation and correlation. The longer you're in a career, the better you are at that, better position you hold, right? Like an accountant, when they start out as like a staff accountant, and eventually they become like a CFO or, head of their own small business. And the same as any profession. The more time you spend in it, the better you get, and you progress and grow. And when you early retire, you disconnect from that system of, carrot and stick, and sort of like you get like little nibbles of the carrot as you climb the corporate ladder, et cetera, so forth. Instead, you disconnect from that, and you have to find personal growth and meaning in other ways, because you're not necessarily trying to climb the corporate ladder or, trying to grow in some way. And so that's something you have to sort of tackle. And it's a challenge, I think, mentally, when you no longer identify as like you used to be the lawyer or the accountant or the plumber. And now you're not. Now you're like, I'm this person. I'm the collection of my interests, or something to that effect. But it is better, I think, than chasing, on the hamster wheel, around and around you go. By the way, guys, if you have any questions, put them down below. Whatever you want to talk about, that's what this stream's for. We talk about anything. So shoot your questions down below, and I'd be happy to answer, or to get down some rabbit holes like I often do. But yeah, unplugging, it's tough. I find myself pulled between wanting to grow, and by the way, grow, I mean financially as well as spiritually, and et cetera, and so forth. But part of, I think, progressing, within my business growth, is, call it one of my metrics, is that I value growing. Growing business is valuable to me. So building a cool company, or building something, it feels good. It feels rewarding. And the yardstick that you use to measure your success in real estate, in business, is money. Like, if you make zero money, people consider you a bad entrepreneur, right? People vote with their wallets. So if you're good at what you do, people will pay you for it. If you're bad at what you do, in most cases, you won't get paid very well for it. And so it just, I guess it's the only real true yardstick we have is, what are you making financially? And so I find myself continually growing financially. And I've gotten to a point now where I talked in my earlier videos in 2018 about frugal and frugal fire, or lean fire, on the one end of the spectrum, and on the other end of the spectrum being this lux fire, or fat fire, some people call it. And so now I could easily be fat or lux fire, and I'm getting to a point where I'll just spend money that I wouldn't have spent 2-3 years ago even, because it's to a point where I'm making enough I can afford to do that. And then once you get used to that lifestyle, you're like, oh, eating out's great. Might as well eat out. Or like, I have neighbors, by the way, amazing neighbors in my current house, but I back onto other houses. And one of my goals has always been to have like tranquility, to have like trees all around me, and a huge amount of property. Ideally, I still live in the city, so to have a huge amount of property in the city is unrealistic unless you have fat fire type net worth, right? And I'm getting to that point, so I sort of set a goal like that's something I want to have, and I know I don't need it. I know that I'm way past more than enough. I don't need to have that, but it's been something that I've been wrestling with. Is like, where do you stop? When is it enough? And will it ever be enough? And so I don't know. I know the answer is like chasing the goal feels pretty good. So I'm gonna keep chasing it and keep growing my net worth. Hopefully not the sacrifice of good sleep, positive relationships with family and with friends, and not sacrificing on quality of life too much. Hopefully, enhancing the quality of life. Because I'll give you an example. Like if I stayed home in 2017, my daughter was a year old at that time. So in 2017, my wife went back to work for a little bit, for a couple of months, and then she quit too. But she had to go back. It was required in her mat leave that she had to come back for like 3 months or something. And so she went back, and that was at a time where we didn't feel financially comfortable to just like pay back all the mat leave. So it just didn't make sense to not go back. So she went back, and I stayed home with my daughter for 3, 4, 5 months maybe by myself, an at-home dad. And I was also running the properties and doing a lot of things that I was doing. And I found that extremely stressful. Like being at home changing diapers and dealing with a screaming baby all the time while working, there was nothing more stressful than I've ever been through. And I've done like 24 hours straight around on properties. Nothing is more stressful than watching your own child. Like just for me, I guess the scream of a baby while you're trying to do any sort of, mental task that requires intensity of thought and that is just, anyway, as an example, I would rather work in a corporate job than do that. Being an at-home parent full-time to young babies, just not built for it. Like I think I'm a great dad. I'm actively involved. I've changed a bazillion diapers. I'm always there. But one of the things I don't like is to be 100% an at-home dad. It's something I don't want to do. I have no interest in it. I'm happy to co-parent. I'm like, me and my wife together, tackling the kids. I'm happy to, take the kids to the park for like 3-4 hours, and I enjoy all that. But like if I was by myself all day with our kids, it would deteriorate my mental condition. And so anyway, my point being, sometimes you need to have that sort of structure, and early retirement might look a little different for each person. It might be, doing 3-4 hours of business calls a day. That's, for me, I like that. That's an ideal day for me, as opposed to a day where I do nothing, or a day where I, have 2-3 hours of business and then maybe an hour or two of, talking to some friends and then time with family for the rest of the day. That's a way better day than just being stuck at home with the kids all day. I love my girls, and I'm pro family. I'm pro spending time. Time with your kids is the best investment you can make in them. It's better than even giving them money, is giving them time, your time as a parent. But there's limits to that, right, with your mental psyche. Anyway, that's the rant I wanted to make. It gives you guys some time to put the questions in. Batwood, good to see you on. Hey, D How To, greetings, Mr. Rosehart. Greetings to you as well. William says, good evening, Mike. March 2022 is the goal. Thank you, William. That's awesome. And it's good to have goals. I think even if you've already reached a level of financial independence, or you're already retired, you're already a business owner, you're looking to get out of your business, what do you do after? It's important to set goals. You have to have something that you're moving towards. You have to have something you're trying to achieve, because it's not a good existence as a human being to not have that level of, ambition or something to chase. Hey, Ellie, good to see you on. Darren, hey, Mike, what are your thoughts on RRSPs? I'm in the highest tax bracket in Canada. Should I max out my RRSP every year? What do you think? Darren, so RRSPs in general are not my favorite tax vehicle, but if you are in the top marginal bracket, definitely 100% be jamming that RRSP full. The idea is the RRSP allows you to shelter 18% of your previous year's taxable income, so whatever you earned in those previous years. So let's say last year you earned 100, this year you'll be able to put in $18,000 into your RRSP, and get a deduction. And then it's cumulative of previous years. So if you had 5 years of making 18%, or making 100 grand a year, you'd have $500,000 at 18% that you could put in a one lump sum right now to get caught up if you wanted to. So in that case, you could, if you have 5 years at 100 grand, you could put $100,000 in an RRSP, and then you get a deduction. As soon as you put that out, you take your after-tax money, you put it in, right? You've already paid tax on the money, it's in your bank account, it's your cash. You take your cash, you put it in your RRSP, and it becomes a pre-tax deduction. So let's say you did 5 years of RRSP, you're in the max bracket, and then you took all those 5 years of cumulative RRSP deductions and you applied them all in your 6th year. In your 6th year, you get a deduction against your $100,000. Let's assume you make $100,000 every year, including your 6th year. In your 6th year, you have $100,000 in income. You would get a tax credit of $100,000 you could apply against that income, or you could go back retroactively and apply the RRSP deductions against certain years. So you have to look into the rules on it. I'm not 100% familiar about how far you can apply those, but I know you can take credits you used in the past and decide to reuse them in a higher tax year. But basically you get a deduction, so that money you put in your RRSP, you get back as if you never paid tax on it. So it takes let's say $100,000 RRSP contribution, and it makes it so that the tax you pay on that 100 grand, you get back. So if you're the max marginal tax bracket, you get a credit back from the government for 50 grand. Put 100 grand in, you get $50,000 back from the government. They're like, here, you paid too much tax, you sheltered that income, so here's your tax back. If you're at the top marginal bracket in Canada, that's 52 grand in some cases, money back in your pocket, which is fantastic, right? Now that money's sitting in a tax shelter, you've got 52 grand, take that 52 grand, put your TFSA, boom. Now you get 100 in your RRSP that's gonna be taxed at some point when you retire. And then you got another 50 grand from the government back, put that in your TFSA, boom, now you have 150 grand. Just by putting 100 in your RRSP, you now have 150,000, plus whatever it grows over time. It'll grow within that RRSP, Registered Retirement Savings Plan. It'll grow in there tax-free until you decide to withdraw from it. And the best part of the RRSP is it is not age dependent. That's a myth. People thought, hey, I can't withdraw from it. If you work those 6 years and you put the 100,000 in your 6th year, in your 7th year, let's say you get fired from your job, you have no job, you're unemployed. You can go withdraw $30,000 from your RRSP in year 7 and withdraw that almost tax-free because you had no income in year 7. So take 30,000 out, all of a sudden you got to claim the income on that. It's the same as if you earned that income at a day job. So the first 12,000 you earn is completely tax-free. So you take that out first. There's some cool stuff you can do with spousal contributions too if your partner isn't working. There's some stuff you can do depending on how much contribution room they have in the past, et cetera, and so forth. But you can get pretty cool and get some cool strategies going with the RRSP. I've always been a fan of using the RRSP contributions if they're available, even if so the idea with the RRSP is that you're gonna take your deduction, you're gonna contribute to your RRSP in your highest earning years, when you're at your highest tax brackets. And the idea is whenever you're in your lower tax bracket years where you're not earning a lot of money, hopefully it's retirement, could just be you take a gap year, but whenever you have low income tax, that's when you're gonna withdraw from your RRSP. And so you're gonna get a credit at 50% tax bracket for contributing to your RRSP, and then hopefully when you take the money out, you might take it out and pay 15% marginal tax rate or something to that effect, and then you get to net the difference. But not only that, even if you were to withdraw from the RRSP a year later at the same tax bracket, at least you have the time value of those tax savings. So over a 30-year period, even if you contributed at 50% tax bracket and say you retired and you have so much passive income in retirement that you're at a max tax bracket even in retirement, it's still worth it to contribute to our RRSP because you get 30 years. Remember I told you about the $100,000 contribution example where you got a $52,000 tax credit back? That $52,000 tax credit back has been growing and compounding for 30, 40 years, whatever. It is like 6 figures better than what it was when you got the credit initially, right? So the time value of that money makes it, I think, imperative to contribute to your RRSP, and it's hard to avoid it. I think it doesn't make sense to not contribute. The only thing better than the RRSP really from a tax vehicle perspective is the tax-free savings account and the primary residence exemption here in Canada. So your house that you live in is completely tax-free on all gains if you live in it for more than, I think, 13 months. So that's the most powerful tax shelter we have in Canada. It's the only reason that I think it makes sense to own instead of rent. You gotta have a property as your primary residence. The second thing is the tax-free savings account. It's amazing. You get you're limited on how much you can put in, which kind of blows. We're at like 70,000, I think, per person if you haven't had any growth inside of your TFSA. If you've been investing in your tax-free savings account, your TFSA, and it's been growing, then cool, you could have a bigger amount of contribution room because of that growth. But if you haven't, then you're stuck with whatever your limits are for each year you've been eligible over 18 to contribute to your TFSA. But your TFSA, there's no credit when you put the money in, but it's after-tax dollars going into your tax-free savings account. Unlike your RRSP, you get no deductions. But anything that happens inside your TFSA, when you go to withdraw it, all tax-free. The RRSP, you pay tax when you withdraw, right? Get the credit when it goes in, but you pay tax when it comes out. The TFSA, no credit when it goes in, no credit when it comes out. So no tax when it comes out. So it's just like a completely tax-free vehicle. Pretty cool thing. I think eventually the TFSA is going to be capped, because what happens if we let this go over someone's whole life and they contribute to a TFSA and they have $500,000 to $1 million with growth and compound interest in their tax-free savings accounts that the government can't touch. So they have $1 million sitting in there, let's say getting 10% rate of return. That's $100,000 a year the government can't tax. So people are going to have tax-free early retirements with the TFSA if they're smart about it. And so I think eventually the government's going to step in and be like, holy crap, we shot ourselves in the foot making this tax-free savings vehicle. So what I've seen is whenever they find things don't work, the first thing the government's going to do is say, we'll lock in whatever's happened so far, like insurance in the 80s. Whole life insurance in the 80s, you could contribute massive amounts of money and have it grow within a whole life or universal life policy tax-free. And in the 80s, like, geez, there's no cap on this. So rich people were putting like $20 million inside of these policies, and it could just grow tax-free, and they could borrow the money back. You can borrow against your insurance policies. And so they put a cap on it based on the amount of premiums you're paying on the insurance policy. So they definitely, but anyone who was on the old policies before was grandfathered in. So get involved now before they cap things, right? Before they realize the error of their ways and they put a stop to it, right? So I would say take advantage of whatever the government's offering you, any handout, any, not handout, but any leg up. The government's incentivizing with the TFSA to save. They're saying to Canadians, save your money and invest it. Most people use the TFSA as a tax-free savings account and they just like leave it at their bank. But use your TFSA to invest in stocks, invest in, like you can just open a TFSA with a brokerage account and then you can grow it faster, or you can use your TFSA to do private lending. You could lend mortgages from your RSP and TFSA and fund people's deals who you find through your real estate network. It has to be arm's length, but you can go ahead and fund their deals and you get 10, 12% return, et cetera, so forth. So there's opportunities there that people aren't taking advantage of. And the government's literally saying, please save money for your future, for your retirement. The government's saying, we can't afford to pay for your retirement. Save for yourself. Here's a tax vehicle to help you do it. And so listen to the government. That's what they want you to do. Eventually, if enough of us listen, though, they'll, I'm sure, cap it and put limits on it, restrictions further than there already are. Like the Canada Child Benefit. You guys have heard me rant about that. Maybe not enough on this YouTube channel, but here in Canada, there's something called the Canada Child Benefit. Every single person who has less than $30,000 a year in income gets about $600 cash, tax-free, per month, per child, uncapped. 10 kids, $6,000 a month cash in your account. If you're a lawyer, quit your job and take care of your kids. If you're a doctor, quit your job, take care of your kids. If you don't shelter the income, the government's going to claw back that Canada Child Benefit. The higher your income, the more the clawback. Basically works out to like a 70% effective total tax if you have kids. If you have 2 or 3 kids or more and you make more than 60 grand a year, it makes sense to actually quit your job. In the current system, the way Canada's set it up, they're incentivizing people to have kids and they're incentivizing the free money for the kids. So listen to the government. They want you to have kids. They're going to pay for it. They're going to give you $6,000 something. It's more than that with the Ontario benefit. $6,000, $7,000 a year per child, cash, tax-free in your account, deposited monthly per child. Like, just to me, that's a dumb policy, but I get their point. Like, they want the refugees that come here who have 6 kids to collect $7,000 a month and not work. That's their, I don't know if that's their intent, but that's how it's being abused right now. And they're incentivizing people with kids. They want the population of Canada to grow. Anyway, I'm getting off that rant right now. Thank you for the question. It definitely got me going. Bark Charles Lee says, how much do you live off of per year? And it depends. It depends on a lot of factors. I've had a lot of fluctuation as of recently, and it depends, I guess, if do you include mortgage pay down? The mortgage principal pay down on my house, it's basically savings. But do you consider that forced savings vehicle to be an expense? Like your mortgage, say it's $2,800 a month, and 1,000 of its interest and 1,800 of its mortgage principal pay down. I would consider that 1,800 to not be an expense. Another thing is like renovations. If I renovate my house and spend $50,000 renovating my basement, or $100,000 renovating my basement, is that like an expense? I just added value. Let's say I did it strategically and I added $100,000 in value to my house that I live in. Now that $100,000, is that living expenses? Because if you include those, I'm spending well in the 6 figures. Like if you include business expenses too, I probably spend a couple hundred, more than like 250,000, 300,000 a year if you include business expenses. Now, if you include my personal spending, I don't spend near that much. Like you guys have known, I was famous for living on less than $2,000 a month with a family. So it depends on what you decide is personal spending, business spending, and then even on the personal spending, some of it is like savings for the future. Like, do you include the RESP contributions that I make to my daughter's registered education savings plan? The government matches 20%. Do you consider that an expense? I spend $400 a month just on that for my kids. Do you consider, the mortgage pay down? Do you consider investments in my house, investments in tools or whatever? Or investing in, my brain, investing in things like that. Are those considered investments for business? Like when I got my courses related to real estate, was that considered a personal spending? If that's the case, then I sometimes spent 6 figures in a year, right? Especially every house I've ever lived in, I've had major contributions financially to renovations to increase the value. And so some people I've seen in the fire community say, hey, I spent $5,000 renovating my basement. That was an expense. They add that into their budget. But I would say it's a one-time expense to increase the value of the home, so I would deduct that. And so the answer is a huge range. I spend between probably $15,000 and $250,000 in a year, depending on what you include and don't include in the spending. Okay, next question. And as you guys know, the super chat gets you pumped up to the top of the priority list, but I'm going to keep working my way down. And if I miss your question, put it in the comments later and I'll answer it for everyone to see. Mike says, I'm working right now at 20 to become a software developer and retire by 40 max. Do you have the problem where you are retired, where all your friends are busy and you're not? Mike, what I've found is when I sort of retired and stepped away from the corporate world, I just stopped hanging out with the friends who worked the 9 to 5. Not entirely, there's still a few friends that I hang out with, but you just change your circle. Like it just so happens that I hang out mostly with entrepreneurs or other people who are real estate investors like myself because we have common habits, we have common goals, we have common interests. You might still hang out with those friends and talk to them, but yeah, I'm sure it's a challenge if you don't have a partner to hang out with, or your partner's not retired, or et cetera. If you have kids and a partner that's retired too, then you're busy enough just with your significant other probably to keep busy. But it depends on where you are in your life cycle. If you're single and you used to hang out with your friends all the time, and now they work 8 to 6 and you don't, then that'll be lonely. You need to make a new circle of friends or something to do with your time. So yeah, those will be challenges that you'll have, but they're easy to overcome. It's not going to be, game changer. And I think, by the way, starting at 20 as a software developer, high paying field of work, by 40 you should be able to retire, no problem, if you can maintain at least a 50% savings rate. Jarrett says, hey Mike, what books would you recommend at the moment? Geez, what books do I have on my desk right now? There's a book, I think it's called Money for Nothing. I think that's the name of the book. That's one that I would recommend as a stock options trading book, mostly around like a value investing type buy and hold strategy. Early Retirement Extreme is a book that I love. I'm a big fan of. I haven't read it recently, but I was a big fan of it. One of my gateway books was Early Retirement Extreme. Another of my gateway books to financial independence was Rich Dad Poor Dad. Another of my gateway, one of my first ever, even before Early Retirement Extreme, the book that got me into it was The Wealthy Barber. I read that in a book report in like grade 9 or something, and it opened my eyes up to the power of compound interest. Now, they assume a really high growth rate, and there's some assumptions in there that don't hold true today, but the basic concepts, if you like a nice fiction book that introduces you to the concept of early retirement, it's a fantastic one. There's a second one, The Wealthy Barber Returns, or Wealthy Barber 2, that I really like as well. I'm trying to think of other books. In business school, I read so many economics and finance books, and some of those touched on pieces of what I understand today, but I don't do a lot of book reading, to be honest. Most of what I read is like just on my phone, articles from, wherever. I used to read like Mr. My Mustache's blog. I read every single one of his posts up until 2017. I had read every single one. There was not a single post on earlyretirementextreme.com or Mr. My Mustache that I hadn't read. I don't think. It might have been one, but pretty sure I read all the posts there. And that was like a book to read all those posts. lots of other blogs too that I used to kind of follow, and same, I find articles people send me and things like that I mostly just read articles these days. But yeah, books. Wish I had more time to read books. I don't have any other good recommendations except for those ones. Next question. Mike, is there a Section 8 equivalent in Canada? Any opinion concerning it? Thank you. I don't know what Section 8 means. If Section 8 means bankruptcy, then like we have a Canadian bankruptcy. You have to clarify for me. I'm not up to date on the Section 8. I don't know what that refers to. Batwood says, always gotta have goals. And you retired so early that you have so much life energy left to devote yourself to many pursuits. This is true. Definitely. Especially if you're retiring, in your 20s or 30s. Dave Goggins says, Mike, it's Dave from the Republic of Ireland. Europe again, tuning in live for the second time. Working on my financial website right now as a side hustle as we speak. Good for you. Welcome. Watt says, hey Mike, what's up? Not too much. Warner Art Productions says, Trump 2020. Honestly, I'm indifferent really, but I'm not really a big fan of Trump. I don't think he makes a lot of good life decisions. I think he's an idiot on Twitter, but I do like the way the Republicans have been governing. They've covered a lot of ground. He's also the first president ever that hasn't engaged in war during his entire 4-year running or whatever as he ran the country. So every other president has engaged in war. So I think the cool thing about Trump is that he's pro-business, and pro-business typically means peace. The economy does the best when there's peace. And so like Obama, he couldn't say that, he was going to war. Trump's like trying to avoid war. He's like, I'm gonna solve things in Korea, I'm gonna solve things, wherever there's issues, like the whole Israel thing, whatever. He's trying to avoid conflict because it's bad for the economy. Smart. Avoid conflict. If I was gonna govern or rule, over a nation, I would try to avoid conflict too. Conflict's stupid. Focus on the economy, focus on the people, give everyone the opportunity to succeed. If people don't want to succeed, when they're given, like if you hand them the tools to succeed and they don't want to use them, that's their fault. Everyone should have the opportunity to rise up. Everyone should have the chance to go to school. Everyone should have the chance to take on whatever profession they want. Everyone should have the chance to, all the opportunities to chase whatever it is they want to do. But if they don't want to put the work in, then they deserve to have nothing. You should have what you work for in this world, and that's what I believe. But everyone should have the opportunity. I grew up poor. And so I think if I didn't have the opportunity to enter post-secondary because I was poor, or didn't have the opportunity to take on whatever venture I wanted to take on because I grew up with nothing, that isn't fair. I think there should have been more out there to help. Like I was an anomaly, and then I was able to escape poverty, and now I'm extremely successful. But I think you need a lot of support to grow and flourish, right, as a human being. And we need more support systems for those in the bottom half of society who really need help, who maybe are anti-Trump because they're suffering right now. And I get it. I get a lot of the liberal, Democrat voting snowflakes. They really want, and it's so stupid. People vote on the dumbest things. They vote on I have a couple friends who are gay, and they're like, I'm gonna just vote for whoever's good for that one issue. And I'm like, do you not care about the economy? Like, no, I don't care about the economy. That doesn't matter to me. I care about this issue. Like, gay marriage, that's what's important. And I'm like, okay. Like, I think it's an important issue, but why is that? We shouldn't just be voting on one issue. We should be able to vote on all these different issues. And I wish there was a way that the voting system would allow us to vote on every single issue. Like, have an abortion discussion, have a, gay rights discussion, have a, welfare discussion, have a healthcare discussion, and have an economy discussion. Don't vote all in one package, because what if, some things that Trump might stand for, I might stand against, right? I might be pro, gay marriage, where but I'm also pro the economy. And I don't think Biden is both those things. So there's just conflicting views, I think. It's hard to vote for just one person. So it's just a shitty system. It really is. However it turns out, I'm sure we'll all survive. We'll all move on. And it'll be just fine. What are your thoughts on life insurance policies as an investment? Watts. So I used to be licensed to be able to sell life insurance, so I'm well versed in the in the whole life insurance space, and I worked for one of the best providers of that in Canada. And so I can comment at a high level. Everyone who sells insurance, I hear them get on social media and talk about how great it is and this and that. The truth is, statistically speaking, you're going to live. Statistically speaking, you're not going to claim insurance. And so for most people, insurance is a bad investment. But if you die, it's a good investment. If you get really critically ill, it's a good investment. Statistically speaking, when you need the money, you won't qualify for it because of some exemption, or you just won't need the money in general. So now let's talk about insurance. That was like insurance in general. Now, whole life investment insurance or universal life insurance, or there's a couple of different names for it, but basically you pay an insurance premium and get an amount of insurance coverage, and then you pay an additional amount that goes into a savings account or an investment account within your insurance policy. And they'll pay you a fixed amount of return with some sort of guaranteed downside protection, like a seg fund typically is what they're mostly investing in inside of these whole life insurance policies. But they'll pay you, say, a fixed return, call it 5% inside of your policy, and all the growth within that savings account in the policy is tax-free. And so if your tax rate is high enough and you're in the top marginal bracket and you've maxed out your RSP and your TFSA, and if you have kids, your RESP, those things are all maxed out, and you're in the top marginal bracket, whole life insurance is an amazing product. You can borrow the money back. It grows in there tax-free. It's a fantastic product. The fees related to the insurance are less than the total tax savings. So your total tax savings are greater than the fees of the insurance to set that up. Because the fees are a lot, by the way. The first year of premiums on your whole life and your universal life policies pretty much goes to fees. Goes to pay the agent who sold you the stuff, huge, massive commission checks, goes to pay the insurance company and all the people associated with it. So the first couple of years you're invested in it, you lose all of that to fees. And so you got to factor that in, that it's not a good investment. Over a 10-year period, the tax-free savings account blows away because it's tax-free, right? They're both after-tax dollars. In your whole life policy, it's after-tax money you're contributing. And unless it's in a corp, in which case it could be pre-tax corp earnings, in which case it can make sense. I think it can make sense to have like my business should have a policy on me. That would make sense because it's a deductible for the business. There's arguments where it can make sense there when you use corporations to structure your insurance investment vehicles. But not talking about that right now, talking strictly about for an individual person, doesn't make sense. If you make $50,000 a year or less, which is a lot of the people who are buying life insurance, what you'll find is they don't need life insurance, and it's not a good investment. And most of the people who sell, most of the financial security advisors and financial advisors that are selling this crap are selling to their dad who makes 60 grand a year and their friend who makes 60 grand a year, who is not in the top marginal bracket, who's paying like an average 20% tax rate. And the fees for the insurance are higher than the tax savings. And they're touting and bragging about how great the tax savings are. Oh, this is gonna grow. In 10 years you can borrow the money out of it. There's some cool things you can do with the infinite banking. Infinite banking concept is basically the idea that you build some cash value inside your investment account within your whole life insurance policy, and you can borrow it out, and the investments will pay the interest on that loan associated with that policy. So it's like you're getting the cash out tax-free, and it's this great thing. It is a cool thing. If you're in the top marginal bracket, it makes sense. I should have a huge life insurance policy. I don't, and I know better. I should start structuring something. I should write a note to myself to go and do that now because I am getting into the top marginal brackets. But the other conflicting piece is it might make sense for someone like myself, let's say you're a dentist or a doctor or whatever, and you can shelter income inside of a corp, and you have kids, young kids. It might make sense to just take $30,000 a year income from your corp, collect the maximum Canada Child benefit, which is like $600 a child cash in your account. So if you have 3 kids, let's say, you're looking at like almost $2 grand a month cash coming in. It's 24 grand a year, tax-free. In that case, whole life insurance makes no sense because your tax bracket's really low. You kept all your income inside of your corp. As an individual, you're not paying the maximum tax bracket. So it doesn't make sense to have a whole life insurance policy. And so in a lot of cases, it doesn't make sense and it's oversold. I saw a lot of agents writing up a lot of policies that people shouldn't have had. And you'll hear them use case studies like a guy who's been paying the whole life insurance for 30 years and like he got $2 million in his whole life insurance account. Had he not set up that policy, if he just given all those policy premiums to an investor or to like whatever, to some investment company, or let's just say their financial advisor had taken those funds and invested them in exchange ETFs, in cheap low MER ETFs, he'd have way more money right now and he'd be able to access it easier. And net of taxes, he'd have more money. And so they go on to these use case, they call them case scenarios, use case scenarios, where it makes sense for whole life insurance, universal life. For 95% of the Canadian population, it doesn't make sense. For the top 1% and potentially the top 5%, it can make sense. For the top 1%, it probably makes sense for most of the top 1%. If you're making $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year, it definitely makes sense. If you're in the top marginal tax brackets, open up a whole life insurance policy. Ideally, find someone who can hook up a universal life policy and start investing in that. And then you can borrow the money back. There's some cool things you can do with it. It can make a lot of sense. But for most people, it doesn't make sense. For most people, the fees associated with the premiums for the insurance aren't worthwhile. So you'll hear advisors argue, oh, but there's the value of the insurance. And in a lot of the cases, for like half of Canadians, it's cheaper just to buy a term policy and invest the difference in the policies between whole life and term into an investment account. And you'd have more money in the end of the day. So something to think about. There's my rant about that. I'm sure all the financial advisors watching are like, screw you, Mike, you're killing my business. But you know what? Like, do your homework for your client and make sure it actually makes sense. I think a lot of advisors, honestly, the LQP insurance licensing doesn't give enough training. There's no scenarios that compared investing in TFSA to a whole life insurance product. And at Freedom 55 and Canada Life and all those places, they don't give you those illustrations. They don't teach their agents in the training program and their advisors how to run those simulations, because then the advisors would never sell any of the insurance. They want them to sell the insurance, right? They don't care if the client gets a 5% return when they could have gotten an 8% return elsewhere, as long as they're getting their fee and it's making sense, right? So it's a conflict of interest in this whole industry. But it is what it is. And we're not going to change it. It's going to be really hard to change it. A lot of us have to get together to try to change it. I don't even believe in commissioned. I don't even think agents should be commissioned. I think it should be fee-based. The whole financial advising industry should be fee-based. It should not be pay based on what you get people to sign up for, because then there's a conflict of interest. Prapa Param says, hey Mike, I heard you say to always go on title for JVs, but I have heard other investors say going on title will also affect future borrowing power. Any thoughts on this? It is true. Both of those things are true. Always go on title, always have a stake in title, and don't go on title. they're both true. Let me explain. So if you plan to get a lot of properties, then going on title with someone, let's say you go on title, two people go together on title, 50-50, husband and wife. Most banks will force you to qualify with 100% of the mortgage payment in your name and only give you 50% of the rental income. So you'll have a negative offset. It's not good. Whereas if you bought the properties separately, then you have better ability to qualify. You'll be able to buy more properties because most banks have a limit on the number of properties you can buy with them. So you'll be able to get more properties, buying them one at a time in your own name, as opposed to JVing with a friend, and then you both lost one property from your total limit that you can have. And your debt servicing ratios will be really bad because, again, they only take half of the income and they're going to be 100% of the expenses. It's stupid. They should give you half of the income and half the expenses. But for some reason, they're like, well, what if the other partner doesn't pay the mortgage? And so you should be liable for 100% of the mortgage and only half of the rental income. It's like, what? If the other partner isn't paying half the mortgage, I'm gonna use 100% of the income to cover it, but whatever. Banks are being super conservative. So that's why you don't wanna go on title. The less people on title, the better from a financing perspective. Don't put your wife on title with you. Ideally, just one of you guys on title. It's much better. Now, at the same time, if you wanna try to save mortgages and you partner with a friend and they go on title and you're like, hey, I don't wanna waste one of my mortgage spots, one of my mortgage qualification spots. Does it make sense to, does it make sense instead to grab, okay, so here's the way to actually structure it. The line of thought is that by setting up that way, you'll be able to buy more properties. But if that person screws you and you're not on title, then you get zero, nothing. And so don't be me. I did that in a couple of deals. I didn't go on title. I didn't register. And I've had investor partners screw me. They went and sold the property without my consent and paid me nothing. Good luck litigating after the fact. Your JV agreement's worth, go wipe your ass with it, right? Unless you want to fight in court for 5 years. And in some cases, it isn't even worth it. So I've learned that, and in some cases, it might be worth litigating. Depends on how much equity is in the property. But my point is, the right way to do it is after the mortgage is registered, you go register a second mortgage for your interest and a notice of interest. So they need your sign off to sell the property, refinance the property, do anything with the property. You're like the lender on the property, and set up a second mortgage or a third mortgage or whatever for your interest in the property. Even if there's no equity left over, put a third mortgage on it to register that, hey, I'm an owner on this property. They can't do anything without my sign off. That would be what I would do. I'd want to do that from the beginning. I don't know why we never ended up doing it. We had talked about doing it and then just never got around to it because it was like $900 or $1,000. In hindsight, I should have done that with every JV I ever did, was register a second mortgage on title to protect my interest. When the property appreciates, my second mortgage is right there. They want to try and do anything, they got to pay me out. The lawyer literally can't close title without me signing off. Hey, I'm a JV partner, I've got a registered mortgage on the property. Lien against title. That's how you protect your interest. And if you want to go refinance, you guys decide you're going to refinance, pull off the second mortgage. Cool. Sign to the lawyer, hey, I'll pull off a second mortgage. We can put the new mortgage on. As soon as that new mortgage is on and it's all done, and I'm going to slap my mortgage right back on there. My second or third mortgage right on there. To make sure my interest and my equity, my half of the equity or whatever the JV structure, that's how you ensure you're secure and you're safe without having a mortgage spot kind of erased. So that's the way you'd handle that situation without having any issues at all. Hopefully that was a little value add tip right there. That's a $1,000 tip right there. It took me thousands of dollars to come up with that solution right there. I lost 6 figures not knowing the answer to that question right there and doing all the JVs that I did without structuring that way. So don't be me. Be smarter than me. Learn from my mistakes. Connor says, hey Mike, all the way from Australia. Considering the almost non-existent yields here, could I get your thoughts on purchasing a manager's unit within a complex management rights as a first purchase? Wait, I'll read that again. Your thoughts on purchasing a manager's unit with complex management rights as a first purchase. So I don't know what a manager's unit is. I'm going to assume that's like a condo, like a condo board or something. Anytime there's a complex body, like a condo board that maintains a condo complex or something, then you're restricted in what you can do. I hate being restricted. I like to be as free as I possibly can in my options within my investment. So if I want to put in a pool, I want to be able to do that. If I want to renovate and add another bathroom or bedroom or whatever, I want to be able to do that. And a condo might not allow you to do that. If I want to put on Airbnb, the condo might say no. Whereas if you have a detached property that's not governed by any board, no HOA, no condo fee, whatever, I don't know. It could be like an HOA you're talking about, and it's detached houses in a community or something. I don't know. Probably it's what you're talking about, and just in Australia it has a slightly different name. I would say avoid that if you can. If there's another suitable option that's within the cost range, go with that option. But if it's a significant difference in price, like half the price, and you have to deal with a stupid management board, it might be worth it because you've got such a discount and there'll be more cash flow, etc. I don't know, I'd have to look at the opportunity, right, to really be able to tell you whether it's worth it or not. But there's opportunity everywhere. Even in this low interest rate environment, people are getting 10% or more return easily. There's lots of things you can invest in that will give you a great return. Of course, you want to balance your risk to your reward as well. Prom says, have you bought any new deals recently? Yes, I'm closing on a few deals. Actually just inked up one today, an off-market deal that I'm excited about. Secondary dwelling unit conversion. I think it's got a nice juicy 6 figures amount of equity in it. Doing it with my mentee. And I juiced up a couple other deals more recently as well. So I'm still taking down deals, but I'm only buying vacant possession. So I don't inherit tenants anymore. It's a firm rule. All of the problem tenants I've ever had I've inherited. So I just don't want to inherit tenants anymore, not interested. The other thing is I'm putting in management in place from day one. I'm trying not to be involved. That's a key piece as well. No, a JV contract is not enough to protect you. I mean, legally speaking, you could go litigate with one, but it's very, very tough. Whoever controls title has all the power. They could have sold the property already and you'd be litigating years later. So it's tough. What the other partner will try to argue is they'll be like, there's negligence and duties, or they'll try to find a reason to not pay you out. Like, hey, you didn't do a good enough job, so here's why I don't want to pay you. But like the GV contract, you'll end up winning because when they sign and agree to share half of profit, doesn't matter how it goes, good or bad, they have to share if there's profit. And if there's loss, then they can come after you too with that JV agreement. So in most cases in real estate in the last 5 years, there's just been huge wins because look at what the market's done here, right? Okay, so here's some context. Small residential complex, 50K salary with purchase price at 400,000, including the property itself, a 3-bedroom villa house. Yeah, I don't know. I have to look at the numbers. I don't know whether it's a good investment or not. It could be a terrible investment. Could be a good investment. It's hard for me to say without having looked at the actual investment, but probably a decent investment. If you can get cash flow from it, then you might get the appreciation long term. I think the government's going to continue to print money. All the developed nations were promoting stimulus because of COVID. So that will cause all the asset classes to rise, right? So real estate's one of those major asset classes that's just going to rise. And if they print a bunch of money, guess what? The value of real estate goes up 20-30%, and the buying power of the dollar is basically going down, right? Because they're printing so much money. When applying for mortgages, will banks also qualify the mortgage you contribute to your RSP towards your total income? That's a good question. I think they would take if you're getting a salary, like they would take what's on your pay stub. So it wouldn't matter if you contribute to RSP. I don't think they would take net of RSP contributions. But if you're, I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that one. I think it would depend. I think there's probably a bank out there that would be conservative enough to look at your total net income after RSP deductions. It might say, hey, only last year you made 50,000 net deductions. And so it might come to bite you in the ass. But probably most lenders could explain it away with a pay stub and say, hey, this is a one-time RSP contribution or something. And I think you'd be okay. Top 6 is, how can I increase my income while I'm in school in order to take on a mortgage 280 plus? I have 180K in equity for a conversion project. Could you rent out bedrooms or something, or make a small unit in your house now? Because that extra rental income could help you to qualify for a bigger mortgage. There's an idea. Maybe you could pick up a side hustle. That would maybe help too. Yeah, it's tough when you're a student without a full-time job to qualify and pull that equity out without going to a private B lender. You could do that too. Jasmine says, have you paid your house off? If no, you have to pay property taxes now that you are retired. No, I've not paid off my house. I don't believe in paying off your house ever. Unless your risk tolerance is like 0. I believe that my mortgage rate now on this house is 1.34%, 5-year variable. So at 1.34%, I am 100% confident I can take all the money that I have borrowed from my house and invest it at a much higher rate, probably 10, 12% more, right? And get that kind of return. And if the cost of that money is like 1.3%, it's like free money. Why would you ever want to pay off your mortgage? That's guaranteeing yourself a 1.34% return. That's terrible. So I like to refinance even my primary residence as often as I can to pull the money out. Pay off house is a bad idea. But yeah, of course you would have to pay off your property taxes in your expenses. Like your budget would have to include property tax. It would have to include eating out or whatever, all your expenses. Anything you're going to spend money on, got to include it. I think the part of your mortgage payment that's mortgage principal pay down, you could maybe say, hey, I need the cash for that every month, but I'm planning to refinance it every 5 years. So make a plan to reinvest the mortgage pay down because it's really just savings. Ilya says, I'm a taper making $900 to $1,300 a day. Wow. Which tradesperson you've seen who make the most with little effort? So you're asking like, which tradespeople make the most money? Typically what I've seen is, and that's really good by the way, typically what I've seen is like electricians and plumbers tend to make the most. And if you're making $200,000 a year in the trades, you're doing really well. $1,000 a day means like if you work every day, you're making 365 grand a year. That's really good. Most tapers don't make that much money. You've got to be really good and set up a bunch of like really juicy commercial jobs or something to make that kind of money. I think on average, if you went into like Indeed average salaries, you'd see like a drywall taper probably is making 50, 60 grand a year normally, maybe a bit more. But maybe not every day you're making that, right? That $900 to $1,300 a day. I don't know. But yeah, it can be really good pay. Like $1,000 a day is better than most lawyers, better than most accountants, better than most, white collar professions. Especially if you can do some jobs like a taper doing houses can maybe do a couple jobs for cash or for barter, in which case like you could potentially make even more. You probably have to claim it, but like at least you'd have more cash up front until you had to pay the tax on it. Should I invest in stock course, Mr. Hamilton's stock course for short-term income increase? I haven't done it yet, but I've heard really, really good things from people I've talked to who have taken the course. So it comes highly reviewed, highly recommended. I will be taking it. I'm in the process. I just don't have the time right now to dive into it and give it the time that it needs. I'm focused on finishing off a bunch of real estate projects. And so when I get all that done, then I'll dive into it and I'll let you know how it goes. Next question. Have you tried Irwin stock hacking yet? How do you like the strategy? So at a high level, from what I can understand, it's a fantastic strategy. I plan to employ it, but I haven't had the time to dig into it and take the course yet. I want to. I do. It's on my list of things to do, but I've got a bunch of other stuff I've got to do first. Hey Mike, are you investing in the stock market or being distracted by the noise, not being able to focus on real estate? And how you do your research on current topics? I don't do any research at all. I just talk out my ass. No, seriously. I just, from talking to people, reading some articles here and there, living and breathing real estate for so long that I've, picked up what I know. Most of it has been just like Google, talking to professionals in the field, like talking to mortgage brokers, talking to other realtors and things like that. And I might read the occasional economic report. But yeah, when it comes to the stock market, I honestly haven't had the time. I've been so focused on, I'm trying to get 10 properties sold, trying to get a whole bunch of stuff figured out. So, yeah. You need to get a lighting kit from Amazon, less than $100, delivery videos. I actually have a lighting kit. I just got to go unpack it and bring it down here. Pure laziness. Pure laziness. Thanks though. I do know that I need to get on that. I know that the lighting on my eyes and whatever is not ideal, but it is what it is. Hey Mike, William and Don here. We wanted to thank you for continuing to share so much. Appreciate it. William, happy to do it every week consistently. Even when I don't have something to talk about, you guys find the right questions to ask to keep me mumbling. Wen says, hi Mike, keep up the good work. Thank you. William says, Section 8 is subsidized housing. There are incentives to build and the government will also help with rent. TY. Yeah, there is a similar program to that in Canada. It's very restrictive. There's a program here in Ontario where they'll provide you a certain amount of money at 0% interest to renovate the property, but you have to rent only to the low income tenant. And what I found is that the $100,000 renovation work will be gone after 10 years because they just, like the low income tenant destroys the property, right? They've got lots of pets, on average, they have more pets, more kids, more drama, they're at home more. It's stuff just, I don't want to like stereotype, but like, it's just what I've seen is that the damage rates are much, much higher. Whereas in the higher income brackets, you'll find people typically are not home, they're working a lot, they come home. If they have an issue with like bugs, they treat themselves, like they just take care of it. Whereas the low income tenants, like they don't have money to take care of it. And so issues become major issues. There's a small plumbing leak. The wealthy person might just hire a plumber and front the $100 and then say, I'll take it off my rent next month. And the landlord's like, cool. But the poor person can't afford the $100 for the plumbing repair. So they don't want to bug their landlord because they don't want to get it, like they're already behind on rent, so they don't want to get evicted. And so they just don't say anything. And the house gets ruined because there's a leak under the sink that eventually like collapses the whole floor. That's been on average what I've seen. Now, not always. There's some fantastic low-income tenants, but for the most part, they're struggling the most with day-to-day life, right? And so when you cater to that customer, you need to budget a lot more for turnover and damages and bad debt expense, et cetera, and so forth. Just is what it is. So I found that investing in that type of housing has not been a preference for me. Now, some people make a lot of money doing it, and power to those people. But I've found that the stress and the additional damages and wear and tear isn't worth the benefits that you get from the Ontario government or the federal government for those programs. Hey Mike, hey, how you doing? 45 watching right now and only 8 likes. Now we're at 15, there you go. Jackson says, hey Mike, love the show. It's better to stay in a safe, high-paying job that you dislike to qualify for mortgages, or going to full-time wholesaling or something like that? It's not the answer all of you want to hear. You all, and I got a lot of messages about this. The answer is stay in your job, qualify for the mortgages. Once you've maxed out your mortgages, leave your job. It's not the answer you want to hear. It's the answer that it's what I did. It's what a lot of us have done that have had the most success in real estate. It's not the funnest. It's not, it's the least risky, and it's probably going to have the best expected outcome. Probability times return, it'll have the best expected outcome. So I would say, statistically speaking, don't leave your job. Suffer through and moonlight, which means in the weekends and evenings, push the real estate stuff and continue to stay at the day job. It sucks, but it's better for you. I'm sure you want to quit and do like a fire lifestyle now, but your financial self 5 years from now will be thankful that you didn't quit too early. So don't pull the parachute too early. I'm a fan of waiting. Most wholesalers fail. Most entrepreneurs fail. So without a good, solid financial foundation base, you won't do as well as you would have done. Maybe you'll do all right. Maybe you'll do well. But statistically speaking, you'll do better with a solid financial base before jumping out of the plane and pulling the parachute. That's just my thought. But you could be an anomaly. You could be that 1% that succeeds. If you lose your job and have a mortgage renewal, do you automatically get renewed? Yes, you do automatically get renewed. Whether or not, so renewals happen automatically. They give you a new term, you can negotiate on your interest rates, but you won't be able to borrow more money. So to go back for more money, it'll cost you, your job will cost you that. But it won't cost you a refinance if you're trying not to pull out any more money. So let's say you do a 5-year fixed term, $200,000 mortgage. After the end of 5 years, it's probably paid down to like $185,000 or something. They'll auto-renew you on a new rate, and you don't have to requalify. But if you want to borrow more money, you need the salary. All right. Are you Polish? No, I'm not. I might be like 1%, who knows? I mean, my grandmother was adopted, so like there's some mystery there, some European mystery, but I'm pretty sure I'm not Polish. Rumty says, hey Mike, hey, how you doing? Raptor says, how long would you wait to invest in downtown Toronto prices? Or are they still going down, the condo market? I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But I hear things are down, so you might be able to find a off-market deal in Toronto, especially in the downtown core. With COVID, people are kind of moving out. I think there's going to be a trend long-term with people working from home, people moving outside of the major metropolitan, because there's no need to live right downtown anymore. And the appeal of that downtown life is gone. And so, or at least diminished significantly. And so I'm long-term bullish on the rural plays outside of major metropolitans, as more so than I am in the major metropolitans. Now, if you're like 3 hours away in Windsor, that's a different story. That's not a major metropolitan. So I'm not betting on extreme growth there. Hi, Mike. Great advice as always. Hey, thank you. Hey, Mike. Been watching for a little bit now. Just purchased my first property. Has 3-bedroom plan. Renting the other 2 out. Hey, right on. House hacking. Love it. Ram T says, do you suggest investing in a rental property in the US or private lending in Canada, or both? I can't just suggest one over the other. It depends on your goals and your preferences. It could make sense to buy the property. There's also tax ramifications of doing both. I personally, from a time perspective, like private lending as opposed to investing in active real estate. But if you have the time or the passion for it, then maybe it makes more sense to do that. So it depends is the answer. Anyway, it's been a good hour. I've appreciated y'all tuning in and watching. I'll see you next week, like I do every week, live 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Wednesday for the Mike Rosehart Show. This has been, episode, we're well over 120 episodes now. I should actually label all the episodes. That'd be smart. Someone should go ahead and do that for me. I think I deleted one by accident too. So we're actually lost one episode like 2 years ago. I deleted one. It's a mistake. And the second one, I think I deleted on purpose. I said something in it that I didn't want to have the legal ramifications of what I said in that video to be held against me. Some investment advice or something I gave, and I didn't pre-qualify it. And someone commented and was like, you could get sued for saying this. And I was like, good point. Can I delete this video? But yeah, I try to go live and I go candid for you guys, and I hope you can appreciate that I do it every week, and I'm consistent. So that's something that I think in whatever you do, you should be consistent and you'll have the most success. As always, the secret to unlocking a wealthier you, 3 levers to control your financial future. spend less, earn more, and maximize returns on the difference. Thanks everyone, and we'll see y'all next week. I should put it in a playlist. That's a great idea. I have a playlist. I just have to add them all to a playlist. It's a good idea, but then I have to log back in, and just so lazy. I could put so much more time into this channel. I could do so much better. All right, everyone. I'll try to spend more time in the new year. That'll be a resolution. Bye, everyone. Have a good Wednesday.